Is this a glorious morning to recognize our veterans here at Stubbs Park? For those of you who might remember last year, we had a tent, and we were concerned that the tent might collapse under the weight of all the rain that was coming down. So we have evened things out today with this beautiful weather, and I want to thank, Tony's going to thank who brought that good weather for us today. So thank you, Tony. Before I go any further with the program, I just want to mention a couple people here. Are there any Gold Star family members here today? I believe Carl Reinhardt, my neighbor, usually is here. I don't think he's here today. Are there any Blue Star mothers here today? They had a presentation at our council meeting the other night, a very moving presentation. Now, we're here to recognize veterans today and all that they've done for our country. Are there any World War II veterans here today? And if you're able to stand or raise your hand, please let us recognize you today. We are honored that you're here today. Robert Thobaben was one of our speakers a number of years ago, and has a great deal of information about World War II and has written a number of books about World War II and the military. So, Mr. Thobaben, thank you for being here again today. Are there any veterans here from the Korea era, or during the late 40s through the 50s? Thank you for your service. There are veterans here from the 60s, the Vietnam War, through the 70s. If you please stand and take recognition of those. Thank you for your service. From the 80s and the 90s, are any veterans from the 80s and the 90s and those who would have participated in the Gulf Wars? Please stand to be recognized. And from the 90s through the 2000s, the 2010s, and up till present, are there any veterans or active service members here today? We very much appreciate your service, and we're honored that you're here today to allow us to recognize what you've done for our country. I just want to mention briefly, Community Band, Centerville Community Band, they are always here. They do a tremendous job under the direction of Tom Frogman. Thank you, Community Band, for being here. And our Public Works Department. We wouldn't have these nice chairs and this nice surrounding were it not for the Centerville Public Works. For the men and women of our Public Works Department, thank you very much. I want to mention our honor guards here today. For the Centerville Honor Guard, we have Lieutenant Anthony Green, Officer Fapa Luafo, Officer Austin Warden, Officer Keith Wallace, and I'd like to mention Officer Luafo, who is serving his last service as an honor guard as he is retiring from the Centerville Police Department sometime in the first part of December. And Officer Luafo, if you please step forward to receive appreciation from this crowd and all you've done for the city of Centerville. And a regular member of our honor guard is Officer John Davis, and he just retired. He served on the honor guard probably for 25 years, but he just retired, and I know he misses his duty as as a member of the Centerville Honor Guard. But Officer Davis, we appreciate your service over these many, many years. Thank you. For the VFW Honor Guard, we have Richard Lauterbauer, Honor Guard Charles Frank, and Honor Guard Richard Hughes. Then in the Washington Township Honor Guard for the firefighters, we're very pleased that you're here today. Firefighter John Granby, Firefighter Nick Griffin, Firefighter Rodney Beam, and Firefighter Greg Ortell. So to all of our honor guards, thank you for being here representing our community. We also have some guests today that I'd like to recognize that are here with to honor our veterans today. And one of our guests is Washington Township trustee Dale Berry. Dale, don't sit down just yet, Dale. Dale has been a township trustee for about 14 years now, and he is retiring. There's going to be a retirement celebration over at the rec center for Dale Berry, but Dale has been an absolutely outstanding public servant over all these years. He served on boards for the township before he became a trustee, and all of us have been honored to work with Dale. And Dale, thank you very much for being such an integral part of our community. We're proud to serve with you. Also from Washington Township, we have here today Sharon Lowry, who's up front here. She's a Washington Township trustee, and Sharon, we appreciate you being here today. Never missing our Veterans Day and Memorial Day ceremonies is our County Commissioner, Carolyn Rice. Carolyn, thank you for being here. And our state representative, Tom Young, also never misses these events. So thank you, Tom, for being here. I don't believe our state senator is here. Is Niraj here by any chance? He usually makes it also, but I don't think he was able to make it this morning. And we're honored to have with us Emma Spire from Senator Brown's office here. Emma's back in the back. Emma, thank you for sending greetings from Senator Brown. We appreciate that. I believe that Liz Foltz, who's also the Washington Centerville Public Library Director, she is here, I believe. Liz, are you here? There she is. Okay. Thank you, Liz. We'll have a little announcement at the end about a program which the library has available after the program today and also tomorrow. Captain Mike Brem from the Montgomery County Sheriff's Department. I believe Mike is here also. Okay. And then you don't need to applause because, to be honest, we get applause all the time. So from City Council, I'm just kidding. You don't need to applause individually on these. But fortunate to have with us today our Deputy Mayor, Joanne Rao, who's up front. Our Council Member, Mark Eggert, are both here today. So Mark and Joanne, thank you for being here. We have from our city staff, and they don't need to have individual applause either, our City Manager, Wayne Davis, our Assistant City Manager, Mariah Vogelsgang, our Communications Director, Kate Botsdorf, our Public Works Director, Pat Turnbull, our Police Chief, Matt Brown, Development Director, Eric Collins, and our Community Resource Coordinator, Drew Simon. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for your support of our veterans and our community. At the 11th hour, on the 11th day of the 11th month, exactly 105 years ago today, the Congress of the United States passed a resolution in which it first proclaimed November 11, 1918 as Armistice Day. This resolution was passed to mark the end of the most destructive and far-reaching war in human history. It was thought that World War I would be the war to end all wars. Although the exact words were not included in the text of a resolution, the meaning was clear: never again. Never again should the world go through the carnage, the destruction, and the loss of human life brought by World War I. But as we know, there was an again, and then another again. World War II, Korea, Vietnam, the Gulf Wars, 9/11, Afghanistan, other conflicts around the globe. Not wars or conflicts of our nation's choosing or initiation, but ones that nonetheless we recognized as a nation were an assault on freedom. Our nation and our veterans are always working towards never again. We know that the troops who stormed the beaches of Normandy, France on D-Day and Operation Overlord are like my father who landed troops on the beaches of southern France in Operation Dragoon, or the soldiers on Iwo Jima who battled the Japanese, or those World War II veterans who are here today, all prayed that their efforts to defeat evil would lead to never again. Never again would sons and daughters be sent into battle. And I'm sure that my father-in-law, who was an 18-year-old private in the U.S. Army at the end of World War II, who helped to liberate the concentration camps in Germany, moved forward each day with the hope and purpose that by his actions and those of his army brothers, never again would humans suffer such atrocities at the hands of other humans. We know today that there is an ongoing assault on the free and civilized world that must be defeated. As much as we would like to, we cannot wish away conflicts and war, or simply hope that terrorists will not commit such horrific acts of depravity against fellow humans like what the world saw a mere month ago on October 7. Our nation, as we recognize, can only preserve freedom if we in fact prepare to fight for what our country is, what it stands for, and let those know who threaten our freedom that we will enforce those freedoms. While it is often easy to ignore historical context and even popular at times to point out the perceived unfairness of our nation since its founding, it is without dispute and requires no expert in history to know that without a strong United States of America and the veterans who have served over these many years, the world would be much, much different than it is today. 78 years ago this past August, Douglas MacArthur, before accepting the surrender of Imperial Japan, ending World War II, stated, "It is my earnest hope, and indeed the hope of all mankind, that from this solemn occasion a better world shall emerge out of the blood and carnage of the past, a world founded upon faith and understanding, a world dedicated to the dignity of man and the fulfillment of his most cherished wish for freedom, for tolerance, for justice." Today we are thankful that every minute of every day of every year there is this constant for our nation, and that is that the men and women of our armed forces have willingly accepted the responsibility to be the barrier between the freedoms we cherish and those who wish to take them away. We are thankful that you, our veterans and active duty members, take that vow to do your best to make Douglas MacArthur's earnest hope a reality. Our nation's veterans are our nation's heroes, with thousands of stories of self-sacrifice for the good of our nation. It is our duty, as those who did not serve and those who served, to keep those stories of heroism and service above self alive in this country, lest we forget the incredible sacrifice made by millions to allow us to live as we do today. History forgotten or tarnished is a tragedy we simply cannot allow to happen. So after we leave this ceremony today, it is important that we not just tell you, the veterans, of our appreciation for what you have done, but that we tell our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, that the preservation of freedom does not happen by accident. The preservation of freedom must be intentional. You, the veterans, and those men and women in service to the United States Armed Forces today have shown us all that you are the finest, the most honorable, and the most heroic. On behalf of a grateful community and a free nation, we don't know you all, but we owe you all, our nation's heroes. Thank you for this honor that we have to be with you today, our nation's veterans, our nation's heroes. Thank you all for being here today. So we're going to do something a little different with the Pledge of Allegiance today. I'd like, if we could, to have the youngsters, the young children today, come on up and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. So would you come on up to the front and lead us in our Pledge of Allegiance today?
States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing for the invocation. Will you pray with me? Lord, we humbly come before you today, first and foremost, giving thanks. Your word reminds us to be strong and very courageous. And today we honor those who have heeded that command. So Lord, bless our veterans, their families, and the communities that support them. May we honor you as we honor them. In Jesus' name, amen.
wanted to mention just a couple other people that are with us today. Judge Dressel from Kennedy Municipal Court, he never misses a Veterans ceremony or Memorial Day ceremony. So, Judge, thank you for being here today. And also newly elected Township Trustee, back in the back, Mr. Lenny. So thank you for being here. We are fortunate to have with us today from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And as I mentioned to the Colonel, as he knows and that we all know, we are extremely proud to be the area that is the home of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. When people think of the Dayton area, they think of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And we are proud of that affiliation, and we try to do everything we can to foster that great relationship, and it is a tremendous relationship. So we're fortunate that the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base means so much to our country and so much to our community. We welcome all those who work at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and have an opportunity to serve there. But today we are fortunate to have with us Colonel Aaron Tucker, and found out just a little bit about him before, but he's a graduate of the newest member of the Big Ten, USC. So I don't know how he feels about that, but we're glad that they're a member. And he's also a graduate of Texas A&M, and he was last stationed before coming to Wright-Pat at Scott Air Force Base, and has been here in the Dayton area approximately 10 years. And he's with his wife, Michelle, who's with him today. And he is the Senior Material Leader and Chief of the High Speed Systems Division at the Air Force Research Lab. Colonel Tucker manages 120 scientists and engineers in the area of hypersonic aerodynamics and propulsion at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and he works with NASA and research universities around the country. He's a test pilot, and he's a fellow of the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics. And Colonel Tucker, we are very pleased to have you here today and hear what you have to say to us. Thank you for being here.
Good morning on a beautiful day in November. Thank you, Mayor Compton, for your introduction, and to the City Council for allowing me to speak today. Thank you, Pastor Thornhill, for your heartfelt invocation. Thank you to the Veterans of Foreign Wars, Post 9550, Centerville Police Department, and Washington Township Fire Department Honor Guards. And of course, thanks to the Centerville Community Band for their beautiful rendition of our national anthem. Thank you. Welcome to all veterans and their family members and distinguished visitors, especially Jason Riley, Richard Lauterbauer, Robert Daly, Gus Vitale, Enzio Vitale, and Richard Gard, this year's veteran honorees. Finally, I would like to welcome members of the Centerville and surrounding communities in attendance. Thank you for taking this time to honor our veterans. Veterans Day is a celebration in honor of all Americans' veterans and their quiet courage and exemplary service. It is an opportunity to express our gratitude and acknowledge their many sacrifices and accomplishments. I would like to acknowledge the veterans in the audience as we take this opportunity to thank you for your service to our country. Whether you served 1 day, 1 year, or 30 years, you have answered your nation's call, and I'm proud to stand with you in service to our country. Our service is rooted in a sense of duty and integrity with our shared values found in those few Americans who have lived the military way of life. This year marks 50 years of an all-volunteer U.S. military that is the most potent and capable fighting force in world history. It also marks the 30th anniversary of the Vietnam Women's Memorial on the Mall in Washington, D.C. On November 11, 1918, Americans and allies across the globe effectively brought an end to World War I when Marshal Ferdinand Foch, Supreme Commander of the Allied armies, met with Germany's government representative for the signing of an armistice at 11 a.m. in a railroad car in a French forest near the Western Front. A year later, President Wilson proclaimed November 11, 1919 as the first commemoration of Armistice Day. President Wilson said, "To us in America, the reflections of Armistice Day will be filled with solemn pride in the heroism of those who died in the country's service and with gratitude for the victory, both because of the thing from which it has freed us and because of the opportunity it has given America to show her sympathy with peace and justice in the councils of nations. The original concept of how we recognize Veterans Day was for a day observed with parades and public meetings, with a brief suspension of business beginning at 11 a.m. on November 11th, to honor veterans of World War I. The federal holiday we recognize today was approved by Congress in 1938, but it wasn't until 1954, following World War II and the Korean War, that Congress replaced armistice with veterans, amending the original act to commemorate November 11th as a day in America when veterans of all wars are honored. So today we come together to honor and recognize all of our American service members, past and present, for your service to our country, both in uniform and out. We live in unprecedented times. The United States and its allies rely on air power and space power, and I'm proud to serve with the airmen and guardians who have answered the call. It's not the powerful weapons or sophisticated technology that make our Air Force and Space Force the greatest in the world. It's the true strength of our forces, is the spirit and skill of our airmen and guardians. At Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, 30,000 military and civilian airmen and guardians execute our mission to deliver war-winning capabilities every day. As the world changes around us, as the Air Force evolves to meet the challenges presented in our future, some things endure, such as the need for our Air Force, Space Force, and sister services to counter threats to our nation and our way of life, and the dedication of our airmen, guardians, soldiers, sailors, Marines, and Coast Guardsmen who stand watch. Today, thousands of airmen and guardians are deployed across the globe. While our operations tempo is high, our nation's airmen and guardians set the standard for excellence. We are continuously reminded of the courage, commitment, and sacrifice that they offer on a daily basis. Our contributions span the entire spectrum, from precision strike, airlift and air mobility, and persistent intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. Other mission areas such as battlefield medical support, casualty evacuation, high-end personnel rescue and recovery, and joint tactical air control put airmen in the thick of the fight. Guardians provide space-based communications, precision, navigation and timing, and early warning. Through the command and control of all DoD satellites, Guardians provide in-theater secure communications, weather and navigation for ground, air, and fleet operations, and threat warning. When today's Air Force is hailed for its merit, you, the veterans, spouses, extended family members, and friends, share in that praise because of the foundation of success that you helped to establish in your time in uniform. We are the results of the leadership, loyalty, and innovation of your years of honorable service. I can cite many examples about the feats of our veterans, both in uniform and out, but I'll just highlight a few examples of the impact that veterans have had. Earlier this year, Major Kyle Konkolitz and Senior Master Sergeant Christopher Reedy were recognized with the Distinguished Flying Cross for hostage rescue mission in Nigeria in October 2020. They flew a CV-22 on the longest nighttime hostage rescue mission in U.S. military history to airdrop a SEAL team and then land to exfiltrate the SEALs and the rescued hostage. Senior Master Sergeant Reedy observed that the people I serve with are what make it worthwhile, and I view them as a second family. It is that esprit de corps that joins veterans across the generations. Valor is also demonstrated during humanitarian operations. In 1975, President Ford ordered Operation Baby Lift to rescue 2,000 Vietnamese orphans. First Lieutenant Regina Ani was a flight nurse assigned to the 10th Aeromedical Evacuation Squadron. She departed Saigon on a C-5 Galaxy with 270 orphans when the aft pressure door and ramp blew off, crippling the flight controls. The pilot struggled to return but touched down 2 miles short of the runway, breaking the huge aircraft into 4 parts. Despite a broken foot, lacerations, and a back injury, Lieutenant Ani helped rescue 149 children from the wreckage through waist-deep mud and saturated with burning jet fuel. For her heroic and selfless act, Lieutenant Ani was awarded the Cheney Award for an act of valor in a humanitarian interest performed in connection with aircraft. She continued to serve for another 25 years, and Colonel Ani retired as the commander of the 386th Expeditionary Medical Group in Kuwait in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. Veterans continue this tradition as a global force for hope. In August and September of 2021, Air Mobility Command airmen rescued 122,000 refugees from Kabul, Afghanistan during the largest evacuation of non-combatants in history. One C-17 crew carried 823 passengers out of Kabul in a single lift. Lieutenant Colonel Austin Street called the operation not only the most important and significant mission I ever flew, it was also the most challenging. Every veteran has a story about their service. My father served in the infantry in Vietnam and didn't talk much about his service there when I was growing up. As you can expect, my mother was not happy that her new husband was drafted and sent overseas, nor was she particularly impressed when I told her that I was joining the ROTC in college. I was looking for a challenging mission, and service and excellence were important values in our family growing up. It turned out that my brother was also looking for a challenge, and he served in the Air Force for 16 years as a C-130 pilot. Mom now has a different perspective and is proud of her son's service. I learned a lot about my father's service in Vietnam as an M60 machine gunner when my son interviewed him as part of a school writing assignment. We dug up old photographs and listened to him relate his personal experience. Interestingly, midway through his tour, the Army learned that he had experience in rice agriculture from his family farm in Northern California and put him to work teaching Vietnamese farmers modern rice farming methods. He was glad to be off patrol duty. I had a similar mission 40 years later as an air advisor teaching the Afghan Air Force how to conduct light and medium airlift. My wife's grandfathers served in World War II as a U.S. Navy comptroller and Army locomotive mechanic in Europe, and then as a stateside guard at a POW camp in Arkansas. Additionally, her father served as a pilot in the California Air National Guard. Many of you here today probably have your own stories to tell of valiant unsung heroes, formally recognized or not, that you know or have known over the years. Some may call them war stories, but others still may call them living history. I serve because there is no greater calling than serving and protecting others. We must understand and preserve what we value as a nation and stand at the ready to protect it. All who come before us served this country out of a profound sense of duty and honor. We share the understanding that the freedoms we have today are secured through our commitment to defend them. Those freedoms have been secured by those who come forward and serve before us, and it is our hope that those who selflessly volunteer to serve in our nation's military in the future will continue to protect our great nation. Gratitude also goes to veterans' families. My wife and kids have borne years of separation and multiple moves across the country. This makes it difficult to establish career, social, and educational continuity. Each military family sacrifices in their own way, including some who care for their wounded warriors or mourn their loss. Many of you serve our nation out of uniform through continued Department of Defense civilian employment, volunteering at military installations, or running a small business and hiring veterans, or creating a community which is supportive and welcoming to veterans and their families. Through this spirit of inclusion and support, you express your commitment to duty, honor, and country. Veterans enjoy continued support of our local community, including Centerville. The event is a great example, and I thank you on behalf of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Also, there's a veterans exhibit at the library that Mayor Compton talked about, and Dr. Meyer will be talking about his experience as a Vietnam veteran today at 1 p.m. This beautiful Veterans Memorial has been honoring veterans since 2004 and is a moving tribute to our community's appreciation for the service of all veterans. Your support is critical to our continued ability to support and defend our nation's interest. In 1789, General George Washington said, "The willingness with which our young people are likely to serve in any war, no matter how justified, shall be directly proportional to how they perceive veterans of earlier wars were treated and appreciated by our nation." While we formally recognize and honor those who have worn and now wear the uniform of our nation's military on this day, We are dedicated to building on their legacy of service. So, on Veterans Day, we all share a unique perspective of faithful service to our country and to those who have served before us. We call on each other to give thanks for one another and for the time we have together, to pay tribute to those we have lost, to say prayers for those serving in foreign lands. Please take this opportunity to share your story of service with your family. On this Veterans Day, I salute you on behalf of a grateful nation. Thank you for your service.
Colonel, you're a prime example why we have great confidence in those at Wright Pat and our military. Thank you very much for your speaking to us today, and thank you for your service to our country. Thank you very much. I want to mention that most of you have had an opportunity to see, and if you have not, please take the opportunity to see the release for the individual services that are at the back of the Veterans Memorial. Those were put together, created, sculpted, placed here by Virginia Hess. Virginia passed away a little bit earlier this year, and she had a celebration of life that took place a couple days ago down at the Dayton Art Institute. And she is a world-renowned artist and sculptor, has created sculptures and artworks, pieces all over the country. I just wanted to mention one thing about this relief here. And a legacy is something that we leave or give to others, and something that will last beyond our lifetime. And that's what's here with the reliefs that Virginia left for all of us here in the city of Centerville and this Centerville community, and all of us appreciate. But as I mentioned at her celebration of life the other day, there was one, I happened to be out here just one day looking in advance of one of the events that we were having here. I think it was Memorial Day. And there were a couple little kids that were out here, and their mother was up here kind of walking around the hill in the Veterans Memorial here. And the kids, as kids are like to do, they were running along all of the reliefs, and they were running their hands along, feeling the different, there's a lot of texture to each of the reliefs that she prepared. They got to the one on the U.S. Army, and one of the little, I believe it was a little girl, yelled back to her mother, said, "They've got a picture of Grandpa here." And I had a chance, and I was kind of surprised with that. And the mother came over there and kind of looked, and she said something to me as we were kind of walking out together. She said, "My father had been a medic in the Army, and they had seen a picture of my father and his serving, and was something similar to what you'll see on the U.S. Army relief." So if you have a chance to see that, what that means is, I think all of us view our family in those reliefs. We see our fathers, we see our brothers, we see our neighbors who served in the military. We appreciate what Virginia has done to this community by having those reliefs here at the Veterans Memorial. So I'm very pleased to have an opportunity. Peter Hess is Virginia's son. He's going to talk just a couple minutes about his mother and what she meant to our community. And I do want to mention just one thing as Peter's coming up, that there will be a tree planted in Virginia's honor in the spring. It's not a good time to plant a tree, so we'll let people know when that's coming, and I'm sure Peter and family will be here. So, Peter, we appreciate your being here to talk a little bit about your mother, and we are honored that you are and that your mother did all that she did to make this Veterans Memorial and other places throughout our country better. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Compton, and thanks again for saying some very nice words at my mother's life celebration. It was this past Tuesday. Her birthday also happened to be Election Day. And because she believes so much in voting and collaboration and working together to get what you wanted done, we decided to have it on Election Day. Probably cut into the size of the crowd a little bit, but because I know quite a few people were working the polls, as I would have been on that day. my mother believed in collaboration and working together. And there's no better example. I mean, behind us we have firemen and police officers working together to get the job done. We have some people that must be in the background too to help support what goes on. The city officials and city employees that put this on, this event, this fine event. I was a photographer at the Journal-Herald and Dayton Daily News and a few other places, and this is by far the best Veterans Memorial celebration of all of them that I've ever attended. Mom had a very positive outlook on life. She believed glass half full. She believed everything works out for the better. She believed that people should work together for the greater good. And those are some of the examples of what you see behind. The little bit of history, my mom didn't like to explain her work. She just wanted a word to head you in the right direction, and that was about it. So you'll see just on a couple of the medallions, bas relief, spelled B-A-S relief, is the artist term of what you see back there. It's kind of a hybrid between a two-dimensional and three-dimensional piece of art. Anyway, the one for the Army, both my uncle and my dad were in the Army. And my dad was wounded from a mortar shell, and you'll see one of the medics holding a helmet with a deep dent in it. And it was, according to my dad, it was a dent the size of your fist. Well, that was my dad's helmet. And he survived, thankfully, because it wouldn't be for me. I mean, I wouldn't be here if he didn't survive. Anyway, and then my uncle was a medic in the service, and he later became coroner of Greene County. Was coroner of Greene County. Justin Krause was my uncle's name. Fred Hess is my father's name. And anyway, they worked in different parts of the world, but artistic license, Mom put them together for this. Anyway. My uncle, Justin Krause, was at a medical tent in Europe, and my uncle fought in the Battle of the Bulge. George Patton, General George Patton, came up to him, and my uncle was wearing a gun on his hip, but he was a medic, so he had all these big red crosses all over everything. And General Patton said, "Medic, you're carrying a gun on your hip. And you're a medic." And my uncle said, "Sir, I sometimes have to protect the people I'm taking care of." I don't know if you see many guns on hips of medics nowadays, but then it seemed to be appropriate for my uncle at that time. My mom started working at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base when she was 16 years old during the war. She was drawing, ultimately she drew silhouettes. Some of those silhouettes can be seen on playing cards. And I bought this a couple years ago at the National Museum of the U.S. Air Force. And I don't want to play... I don't want to give my imitation of Chevy Chase and drop these all over the place, so I'm going to be careful. But anyway, I think that if you know anybody who served in World War II, these are World War II vintage planes. Anybody who served in World War II, I think they would be a great stocking stuffer. And it'll probably bring some good conversations, some good stories, too. My dad didn't talk much about the war. Mr. Thababin, you did a great job on the book. And it compiled a lot of history. I learned a lot of things about my dad that I didn't know before until I read your book. Thank you. Anyway, she drew the silhouettes. They were on posters as well as on playing cards. So at the planning of the life celebration for my mom this past Tuesday, what we said is, because she believed in voting, she registered a lot of people to vote. She just wanted you to take it half a day off, enjoy life, maybe look at some good art, and vote. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Every year, we honor all the brave men and women who have served in the United States Armed Forces. These veterans have answered the call to defend our freedom and our way of life, and we owe them, many of you, a debt of gratitude that can never fully be repaid. We also like to honor a handful of those who have served from our communities of Centerville and Washington Township and represented all of us across the country and the world. On this Veterans Day, the city and guests will gather to recognize the sacrifices that these veterans have made, and we remember those who made the ultimate sacrifice as well. But we'd like to tell you about 6 people in particular this year. And the first today is 50-year-old Jason Riley of the United States Army, who very unfortunately was just diagnosed this week with COVID for the very first time. So he is symptomatic and he was not able to be here today. He retired in April 2020 after 25 years of service to the United States Army, which included moving his family to 8 different states, as well as serving in Germany, Qatar, Afghanistan, and South Korea. Riley told me there are just too many memories acquired in 25 years to choose 1 or 2 to share. But he says he misses the people he served with and considers all of them a part of his extended family. Riley said, quote, "The military showed me what it truly means to serve others, something that most who did not wear the uniform will never understand. Births, weddings, funerals, holidays, first steps, first words, days, weeks, years, limbs, and life are all something veterans have and were willing to sacrifice for this nation." Next up is 62-year-old Richard Loderbauer of the United States Army, who perhaps you have been watching for the entirety of this ceremony behind me on the hill. A combat engineer, a drill sergeant, and recruiter, he served in 3 deployments during his time with the Army: Saudi Arabia, Bosnia, Herzegovina, and Afghanistan. He describes a memory of being on the receiving end of a multi-battery artillery barrage in 1991 while breaching a safe lane through an Iraqi minefield. Days later, during review, someone asked, "Whose artillery was that?" His commander responded, "Doesn't matter when it's that close, does it?" He estimates there were several safe lanes going in simultaneously and 6 vehicles in the minefield at the time of the shelling. Only 1 soldier was injured. Richard says he ran out of good stories about his service, so in 2021 he deployed as a civilian to Afghanistan. He spent several months in Bagram repairing HVAC systems and later transitioned to project engineer in Kabul. He lived to tell the tale of having to use his reserve parachute at night during training once. In fact, he went on to skydive with his mother on her 75th birthday, and his mother, he's counting, now has 20 jumps logged. And now, a very special man to so many of us, 90-year-old Robert Daly, we know him as Bob, of the United States Army. He is a very familiar face around Centerville and Washington Township, continuing to lead and volunteer for several community groups. He was active duty as a lieutenant in the United States Army Anti-Aircraft Artillery from 1955 to 1957. He then spent 6 years with the Army Reserve with a mobilization designation in the Office of the Chief of Information, Department of the Army in the Pentagon. As a reservist, Robert spent 3 weeks as a public information officer assigned to the 101st Airborne Division during NATO maneuvers in Turkey. He also recalls serving as a public information officer during the New York World's Fair. He has, many years later, since been named Centerville's Volunteer of the Year and was honored by our City Council just recently on his 90th birthday. And Mayor Compton will be honoring each of these men with a challenge coin from the City of Centerville.
Bob is going to say something. So.
I didn't know until the last minute that I'd have a chance, but as an old newspaper man, you better come prepared. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks to the City of Centerville for hosting this program, and thanks to all of you for coming out to support our veterans. I was a fire control officer on a Nike guided missile anti-aircraft artillery site guarding Manhattan, and later became a headquarters battery commander in the New York Air Defense Command. Later in the Army Reserves, I was a public information officer. While others here have seen combat, I did not. I have the highest respect for those who did, more so for the Gold Star mothers and wives who sent off their sons and daughters. My earliest recollection, almost 80 years ago, I sat with my father in an upstairs bedroom on a Sunday afternoon listening to the radio reports from Pearl Harbor. I didn't understand the news at the time, but I knew it was important. When World War II ended, the boyfriend of a neighborhood girl who came back from Europe with what must have been PTSD. The Nazis had lined up with prisoners, sprayed him with machine gun fire, and somehow he survived. I'm a bit of a history buff with an interest in military history and affection for the men and women who served. I visited Washington crossings in New York City and the Delaware River, Valley Forge, Antietam, Vicksburg, Shiloh, Stone Rivers Crossing, Gettysburg, Andersonville, Pearl Harbor, and Bastogne. At each site, I said a silent prayer for the men and women who died there. A while back, my wife and I rented a car and hired a guide to tour Normandy. Pointe du Hoc was a highlight. Last stop was the American Cemetery over Utah Beach. As we approached the cemetery, they were playing God Bless America on the carillon. I still choke up with that memory. So I salute all the veterans, male and female, on this Veterans Day and thank them for their service. In a corner of my heart, I weep for those who didn't come back. I put on the uniform and did what they asked me to do. Those who didn't come back paid a higher price.
We'd like to pay tribute now to our veterans, and we're going to be playing the service song. So as each veteran, as you hear your service song, we invite you to stand and be recognized. If there's somebody in your family that is currently serving and you would like to stand for them, we invite you to stand as well. If somebody has passed on in your family and you would like to remember them, we invite you to stand. Here is our tribute to our veterans, the service songs.
Thank you. 61-year-old Gus Vitale of the United States Air Force. He is Ezio Vitale's son, who you'll hear more about in just about 20 seconds, and a retired major with the United States Air Force. Gus served in the Cold War, Desert Storm, in Kosovo, and in the global war on terrorism. He was a KC-135 navigator. Once, while on temporary duty to Royal Air Force Station Nordholt, he accompanied the wing commander and met Queen Elizabeth and the royal family as they returned from a trip. 93-year-old Ezio Vitale of the United States Army. He is now, again, 93 years old and spent many years of his life with the United States Army in the 3rd Signal Company, 3rd Infantry Division as a radio operator. Ezio describes one of his most memorable experiences as assisting the division commander with moving the unit throughout the war effort. 100-year-old Richard Gard is a decorated United States Army veteran, having received the Silver Star, Bronze Star, and Purple Heart. The United States Army Master Sergeant served in the infantry in World War II and was a drill sergeant in the Korean War. Gard landed on Utah Beach in Normandy, France, just 3 days after D-Day in 1944. He was responsible for leading his platoon as they made their way into France and Belgium. Gard said, quote, "In war, you don't know what will happen day to day. Almost every day you want to climb up into your helmet, but I was proud to do things for my country. The U.S. Army gave me a chance to better myself, my country, and to get an education." He was again awarded the Silver Star, the 2nd highest military medal for gallantry in action for his service near Bastogne on January 4th, 1945. Thank you so much to all veterans today, and especially to those who share our home and make us so proud. We invite you up.
Would you like to say something? No. You sure? Would you like to say something? Would you like to say something?
My great uncle Dick would just like to say thank you for being here. He loves his country and loves serving.
I want to thank you all for being here today, all the veterans, and all those who support them and their families. I wanted to mention for the Washington Centerville Library that the public is invited to visit the Centerville Library here on Spring Valley today and tomorrow for the annual Veterans Exhibit, an open house that's honoring military veterans. There will be uniforms, artifacts, and historical items will be on display today from 10 to 4:30 and on Sunday from 1 to 4:30. This year's theme is Vietnam Forever Honor. The exhibit pays tribute to the Vietnam War experience, including reflections on this summer's The Wall That Heals exhibit. Following today's veteran ceremony, There will be a reception with light refreshments will be held at the Centerville Library, and you're all invited to attend. Also, as was mentioned by the Colonel, at 1 p.m., Dr. David Meyer, who is a member of the Ohio Veterans Hall of Fame, will speak about his experiences during the Vietnam War. Just want to mention one thing that Ronald Reagan said. Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on to them to do the same. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, our veterans, for keeping our country and our freedoms for us. Thank you very much. Appreciate you all being here.